Yep. It's now 7 o'clock, and I'm calling the meeting of the Finance Committee together, I'm sorry, in the Aldermanic Chamber. Mr. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Alderman Thibodeau.
Here.
Alderman Gouvet is here. Alderman Moran.
Here.
Alderwoman Timmons.
Here.
Alderman Clemens.
Here.
Alderman Klee.
Here.
Mayor Donches.
The mayor was unable to make tonight's meeting, so you guys are all stuck with me tonight. Also in attendance is Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, Amy DeRoche, the Economic Development Project Manager, Director Tim Cummings, Director Matt Sullivan, Karen Smith, the NPD Business Manager, and Brian Sojaka. Sorry, I hope I'm saying that properly. And the NPD Supervisor, do I have that correct?
The supervisor, yes.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Clerk, I'm sorry. Is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, communications.
First, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to Amendment Number 1 to Sea and Shore Contract in the amount of $1,489,275, funded from 81700 Infrastructure Improvement / Riverfront TIF Fund. I'm going to make a motion to approve Amendment 1 to expand the scope of services and amend the budget related to the boardwalk construction of the Riverfront project with Sea and Shore Contracting in the amount of $1,489,275. Funding will be through Department 183 Economic Development, Fund 81700 Infrastructure Improvement / Riverfront TIF Fund.
Mr. Osha.
Yep, so the contract for Sea and Shore that they're currently under is to install the riverfront boardwalks. That went out back in February. The construction drawings for the substation screening were not complete at that time, but it was always envisioned that it would be the same company that installed both, as it's very tight quarters out there. So after speaking with Sea and Shore, the riverfront team and the contractor, we all felt very comfortable that they were perfectly capable of handling this additional work and still keeping on time. So we have offered to amend their contract. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries. Mr. Clerk?
Next, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to contract for riverfront landscaping in the amount of $252,000, funded from 55699 other contracted services / Riverfront TIF Fund. I'm going to make a motion to approve and place on file a multi-year contract for landscaping and maintenance services for the riverfront with the Dottie Group in the amount of $252,000. That's $126,000 annually. Funding will be through Department 183 Economic Development Fund 55699 other contracted services / Riverfront TIF Fund.
Amy, I'm sorry. Mr. Osha.
Yes, so this went out to bid back in March. We had two companies respond. Doty was the low bidder, and they have also been the company that has maintained the riverfront for the past 5 years. So we're just happy to continue working with them. They've been doing a great job.
Are there any questions? Alderman Clemens.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. What is this comparable in price to what we've been having them do in the past?
Yes, this is actually slightly less because they're only doing the east side of the river, as the west side will be under construction.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that motion carries. Mr. Clerk?
Next, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to FY25 compressed natural gas in the amount not to exceed $460,300, funded from 61310 compressed natural gas. I'm going to make a motion to approve Contract Amendment 5 for compressed natural gas with AVSG in the amount not to exceed $460,300. Funding will be through Department 186 Transportation Fund 61310 compressed natural gas.
Director Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This is a renewal of a contract, albeit at a new annual price with AVSG for CNG that's used to power both 10 CNG buses within the transit fleet and also several of the DPW fleet, particularly in the refuse disposal section of what DPW does. Just for a quick way of introduction of the numbers here, we're requesting a not to exceed of $460,300, and that roughly breaks out to approximately $230,600 for Nashua Transit and $229,700 for DPW over the coming fiscal year. As far as the price, it's at $2.699 a gallon, which is exactly the same as the rate that we paid last year, so it's stable funded for the upcoming year, albeit with a slightly projected higher usage based on some of the higher usage we saw over the last year, and happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Thank you.
And that motion carries. Mr. Clerk?
Next, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to contract for Court Street feasibility study in the amount of $50,000 funded from 53142 Consulting Services / Admin Service Escrow. I'm going to make a motion to approve and award a contract for professional services for Court Street feasibility study to analyze economic, technical, and physical improvements of making the facility a more functional space with web management in the amount of $50,000. Funding will be through Department 129 City Buildings, Fund 53142 Consulting Services / Admin Services Escrow.
Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Alderwoman Klima. Your name is Tim Cummings, Director of Administrative Services. I'm here before you to ask for your approval of this $50,000 contract. To provide a little background context, if you all recall, a couple of years back, there was an initiative to move the Court Street over to a trust fund type of an account at that time. Particularly Alderman Sullivan had asked for some sort of strategic plan for the building. So this is just an effort to fulfill that request. We did create that trust fund. We are collecting revenues from the building, and we want to make sure that we have a good operating plan for the building moving forward. So we've asked Duncan Webb. He is a Performing Arts Center consultant. He actually did work for the city previously, so under NRO 5-83 under professional services, we're asking him to come back in, do an assessment, and provide some recommendations so we can develop a strategic plan and also then evaluate the asset and make some recommendations relative to the building itself, so we can achieve our goals, whatever they may be, for the building. That may come through a sub-consultant or a standalone contract through an architect and as a follow-up document. But nonetheless, those two components will fulfill the study effort, and then we can have a conversation as to how the body would like to move forward with the 14 Court Street building. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yes, so my question is, what does this study intend to do on in two different areas? One is, with the current tenant, Liquid Therapy, how would this affect them and their future in the building? And then secondly, how is this going to affect the theater?
If I may.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So relative to the first part of the question, it should not affect the current tenant at all, other than taking in consideration them and the lease that hold that they have, and factoring that revenue in as part of the business plan. But it would be understood that this group would be, if you will, a fundamental component, or a part of the foundation of the building, and so so they will be accommodated. But whatever happens around them still needs to be kind of studied and understood better, and that's really what this study would do. It gets more hand in glove to the theater itself, as Alderman Clement just kind of outlined, and the idea would be is to focus on the theater on the main level, but then also the black box actually underneath, which does not have an occupancy right now, and as I understand it, it would be something that the community would like to achieve. We don't know what that would entail, but this study would hopefully help us with that assessment, and then we can have a conversation as to whether we want to pursue anything or not. But ultimately, it's just trying to be a better steward of the 14 Court Street asset.
Alderman Clemmons?
So, thank you, Madam Chair. So would this study help us understand essentially the costs behind, if you were to put some money into Court Street? Is that what this is
Yes.
trying to do, is establish what the cost is?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yes, yes. Not only the cost, but the effort it would take to actually bring the building to a certain level. Again, it's best way I can summarize it is a business plan or a strategic plan for 14 Court Street itself. Again, it was the genesis of this was an idea that came about at the Board of Aldermen when the 14 Court Street Trust Fund legislation was before you.
Again, Alderman Clemens.
One last question.
Absolutely.
Is there anything in that building right now that is like structural or, you know, would basically, if we don't do this right now, would, you know, be a concern architecturally or, you know, as far as how sound the building is?
Director Cummings?
Thank you. So to answer that question, we have made a lot of improvements in that building over the last few years, whether it was a roof, whether it was the fire protection. We have over the last few years made incremental progress to improving and updating that building. We have not done everything. One of the major elements that needs to be tackled is the mechanical and HVAC equipment. So right now we're running temporary heat, or we were running temporary heat over this winter because we couldn't get parts in to actually service the building itself. Again, one of the elements of this study is to, based on how we want to use the building, make some recommendations on the type of mechanical system that we would need to put in. That would be one of the most important and urgent elements of doing this study.
I can say as a person who's been to one of the shows when the heat was not working, it was a little chilly. So, Alderman Clemens, do you have another question?
No.
Are there any other questions?
Make a statement if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this feasibility study comes back. I think as we look at a lot of the capital expenditure projects that we have going on in our city, to see where this could fit in, especially as we're talking kind of a 5-year plan of bonding right now. Whenever we get this back, to see where that kind of fits into everything else we're looking at. So I think it's good information to have, to at least look at, be able to digest, and then really take a strategic look as a board to see what type of priorities we want to pursue with it and go from there. So I see no harm in this right now. I think it will actually provide a lot of clarity.
I want to add to that and actually ask a question to you, Director Sullivan. Will the funding for this be coming out of the, I'm sorry, Director Cummings, it's been a long day. I'm sure you all feel the same way. Director Cummings, will this funding eventually be coming out of the trust fund and so on that we set up, and not necessarily out of the capital expenditures? Is that what we're hoping for?
So if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Sorry.
Yeah.
Told you it was a long day.
The answer to that is this is actually being funded through a prior year escrow.
Okay.
So it's actually, we set money aside in an escrow. Actually, I don't believe it was last year in FY24. I think it was FY23 off the top of my head, but don't hold me to that. But nonetheless, it's coming from an escrow, and that's about $50,000. We may need more money. And if that's the case, I will be coming back before you, and that additional monies, I would anticipate coming from the trust fund. When I last checked in on it, we had about $50,000 in the trust fund accruing.
That was going to be my next question. Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. Knowing this, you know, I knowing the information that we're going to get from this, I think is good. But I take note that, you know, the Board of Aldermen voted pretty overwhelmingly that the Keefe Auditorium was a priority, and I hope that doing this, if we do move forward with this, is not going to jeopardize anything that we would have to do over in that building in order to keep that. So I'm going to ask that question through you to Director Cummings.
Please, Director Cummings.
Yes, thank you, and I will take quite good joy in answering it in the fact that this is separate and distinct from the Keefe Auditorium. I would foresee no reason why whatever happens here would segue what happens over at the Keefe Auditorium, but ultimately whatever decisions are made are yours for both buildings. and you're gonna need to make some decisions on that. All I wanted to do was fulfill a prior request that was made that was 2 years old, that it takes time for us to do some of these
Right.
things. And this was hanging out there, and I wanted to get it moved along. So it's a little serendipitous timing. Otherwise, it really doesn't have anything to do with the Keith.
Both a good question and a great answer.
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons, did you have anything more to add?
Nope.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk?
Next, communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to purchase for a passenger van in the amount of $64,907.20, funded from 81500 vehicle/surf. I'm going to make a motion to approve the purchase of a 2024 Ford Transit XLT 15-passenger all-wheel drive van, T350, Medroom 148, with McGovern Commercial HQ in the amount of $64,907.20. Funding will be through Department 150, Police Department, Fund 81500 vehicle/surf.
And I'm going to apologize because I know I will mess up your name, so could you please say your name for the record?
Brian Soika, Fleet
Soika,
Supervisor,
okay.
National Police. We're looking to replace a current 2004 Express 8-passenger van at this time that's in dire repair, of rusts and issues with it. So we're looking to replace it with the new 15-passenger van.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Soika?
Just one.
Okay, Alderman Moran.
Thank you. What is the van used for?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What would the department use the van for?
They use it for training, transporting officers to different locations. SRT would be using the vehicle, so it's used for multiple uses when they have to transport quite a bit of people.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that motion carries. Mr. Clerk?
Communication from Amy Gerard, Purchasing Manager, in regard to purchase of a NPD rapid response vehicle for hazardous device units in the amount of $87,474, funded from 81500 vehicle/surf, vehicle/just Grant Bryan Director, discretionary grant. I'm going to make a motion to approve a purchase of a 2024 Ford F-350 Super Duty XLT SRW four-wheel drive crew cab 6.7-foot bed for the hazardous device division with McGovern Commercial HQ in the amount of $87,474. Funding will be through Department 150 Police Department, Fund 81500 vehicle/just Grant Bryan discretionary grant.
It's been a long day for everybody. Mr. Soika?
We're looking to add this vehicle to the fleet, so they can, the truck would be, set up with all lighting, all equipment that they use to transport their equipment to a scene if they have to use it for the hazardous device unit. And the truck is going to be able to transport the bomb container that they will be pulling with it too.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, just curious, what do they do now?
At this point, sometimes they use the fleet maintenance or the building maintenance truck to transport the trailer, or they'll use the other truck that they have for the device unit too.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, Alderman Clemmons?
No, I'm all set.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that motion carries. Unfinished business.
None?
New business resolutions.
There's none.
New business ordinances.
None.
Record of expenditures.
I'm going to make a motion that the Finance Committee has compiled with the city charter and ordinances pertaining to the record of expenditures for the period from March 29, 2024 to April 11, 2024.
Are there any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? And that motion carries. General discussion. Any general discussion? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing no one out there from the public. Remarks by Alderman. Alderman Thibodeau.
Yes, I just wanted to say job well done to the Nashville PD for the incident that happened yesterday in Ward 6. So I just wanted to thank them for a job well done. They have apprehended. As far as I know, the last correspondence I had was at least one person.
Yes.
So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yes, I think they apprehended or have a suspect for an 18-year-old man from Lowell, so yeah. Are there any other remarks by Alderman? Okay, seeing none. Alderman Clemmons, do you have a motion?
I do, I motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and those opposed? And that motion carries, and the meeting is adjourned at 7:20 PM.